Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 12 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be herring, and today is a chest training workout. And the theme for today's video is going to be exercise order. So I'm going to be going over several factors to consider when determining which order to put your exercises in. Let's get started. And while we're resting, it is time to move on to the theme of today's video, and that is going to be exercise order. With regard to exercise order, there are a number of factors that one must consider when determining the best exercise order in a program, and one of those factors is going to be the neurological demand of the exercise. The general rule when ordering exercises is you want to start with the most neurologically demanding exercises, and then towards the end of the program, that's where you should have the least neurologically demanding exercises. The reason is because the more neurologically demanding an exercise is, it's going to require more coordination, skill, and motor control. And neurological fatigue is going to start to set in, and it's going to negatively affect your performance. So by starting with the most neurologically advanced exercises, this is going to allow you to focus on proper form, and also it is going to maximize your neural adaptations. Now, a few examples that I'm going to give right now. One, let's say you are starting a squat program. If you were to start a squat program, and let's say you have a snatch, an overhead squat, and a barbell back squat on your routine, you would want to start with the snatch because that is the most neurologically demanding exercise. Then, once you finish that, you would move on to the overhead squat. And then lastly, you would move on to the barbell back squat. The snatch, it is a very complex movement, and it is not just one pattern, it is a combination of patterns. You are doing the bend pattern, you're doing the pull pattern, you're doing a push, and you're doing the squat pattern all in one. So it's very, very neurologically advanced. Whereas an overhead squat, it's still quite advanced, but the bar is over your head and you're not doing an explosive movement the same way you would be doing with a snatch. So even though it is quite neurologically advanced, you don't have that explosiveness, but the center of gravity is going to be a lot higher, which means you're going to be a lot less stable, which means it's going to be more neurologically advanced than something like a barbell back squat. Then let's say you were doing something like a pushing program. If you were to do something like a standing overhead press and a bench press, you would want the standing overhead press first for the same reason. The bar is overhead, so your center of gravity is going to be higher, you're going to be less stable. Same thing with the pull-ups. With the pull-ups, you would want to do something like pull-ups before something like a seated row, because it's going to be require a lot more effort to do something like a pull-up as opposed to a seated row where you're very, very stable and it's a little bit more isolated. The general rule is you want to start with your explosive exercises first, then move on to your complex exercises, then your compound, and then your isolation. With regard to your compound exercises, you're going to start with your single leg exercises, then your standing, then your seated, and then your supine. But rest is up. Time for set number 2. And while we're resting, let's discuss how the type of exercise can affect the exercise order. For this example, we're specifically going to be comparing compound exercises and isolation exercises. Your compound exercises, those are going to be your multi-joint movements. They're going to use a large muscle group. And your isolation exercises, those are going to be your single joint movements, and those are going to use very, very small muscle groups. So your compound lifts, those are going to be things like your primal patterns. Your pushing, pulling, bending, lunging, squatting, and twisting. Whereas your isolation exercise, that'll be things like your side delt work, your bicep curls, your tricep extensions, your knee extension, hamstring curls. So how exactly would this look in a workout? Let's say we are focusing on a leg focused workout and we want to incorporate some squats, hamstring curls, and knee extensions. Squats would be at the front end of the program because that is a compound lift and it uses very large muscle groups. Everything from the ground up. We're working at the ankles, the knees, the hips, the lumbar spine. So we would want to put that at the front of the program when we're nice and fresh and we have all of our energy and coordination intact. Whereas later on in the program, that's when we would incorporate things like the hamstring curls and knee extensions. Likewise, if we were to do a chest and tricep focus workout, we would want to put all of our pressing exercises first, like our bench pressing and our dumbbell pressing, and then later on in the workout, we would put all of our extension work like our tricep extensions. Same thing with the back and biceps. For back and biceps, we would want to do all of our compound pulling motions first before we start getting into things like curls. The reason that we want to do the compound exercises first is because that's when we're going to have our most energy and when our coordination is going to be at its best when we need it for those complex lifts. Whereas the isolation exercises, we want to put those toward the end of the program because that is where we are going to be able to refine and fatigue specific muscles. Now, with regard to a full body training program, if we were to do full body, the general rule again is you do your compound lifts first, then your isolation. So one of the ways in which you could order it is you could do exercises like your squats and lunges first because those are more neurologically demanding and they're more advanced. And then later on in the program, you could do things like your pressing and pulling because your pressing and pulling is a little bit more basic. But rest is up. Time for set number 3. And while we're resting, let's discuss how the size of the muscle group will affect the exercise order. With regard to the size of the muscle group, you want to place the largest muscle groups first in the workout, things like your legs, your chest, your back, because those are going to require a lot more energy. Whereas your small muscle groups, you want to place those at the end, things like your calves, your biceps, and your triceps, because those are going to require less energy. This is going to be optimal because it's going to allow you to maximize your energy efficiency and also maximize your strength potential. With regard to a leg focused workout, how exactly would this look in a real world setting? Well, let's say you wanted to do something like squats, leg pressing, your hamstring curls, and things like your knee extensions. Well, you would want to start your program off with your squats because those are going to use very, very large muscle groups. From the ground up, we're training our calves, our quads, our hamstrings, our glutes, our core. So everything is being trained when we are doing a squat. Then you could put something like a leg press. With regard to a leg press is going to be a little bit more focused on the quads, so you're not using quite as many muscles, and overall, it's just less surface area that you're going to be training. Then you would start doing more isolation work like your hamstring curls and your knee extensions. Same thing with chest. If you were going to be doing a chest focused workout, you would want to be incorporating something like the bench press first, because with the bench press, that is going to use your pecs, it's going to be using your deltoids, it's going to be using your triceps. So there are very large muscles that are involved, as opposed to doing something like a fly. When you are doing a fly, you're still getting the same muscles involved, but to a lesser extent. So you're still getting a lot of movement of the pecs, but you're not getting quite as much with regard to the triceps, because with the triceps, they're not being activated when you are doing a fly. And then later on in the workout, that's when you would put things like your tricep extensions, because that's a very, very small muscle group. Likewise, with the back, you would want to do things like your pull-ups first, because when you do your pull-ups, you're training your lats, you're training the posterior deltoids, your biceps, you're also training your core quite intensely. And then you would incorporate things like seated rows after that, because you're a lot more stable and you don't really require as much core stability when you're doing your rows. And then lastly, you would finish off with the curls. And then if you were going to be doing something like a full body split, you would want to start with your legs, because your legs are a larger muscle group. Then you would want to do things like your back and chest, then your shoulders, and then you would want to finish off with something like your arms. But rest is up. Time for set number 4. And while we're resting, let's discuss how movement patterns will affect your exercise order. If you are doing some type of training program that is focusing on specific movement patterns, you would want to balance the opposing patterns, something like a push and pull or an upper and lower body pattern. So the reason this is going to be very, very effective is because alternating the different patterns is going to prevent you from overloading one specific muscle area. And this is going to allow you to maintain more balance. If you do something like 3 pushing exercises followed by 3 pulling exercises, you will have completely exerted yourself on the pushing exercises. So you're not going to have as much energy on the pulling, and this is going to create an imbalance. So for upper body, doing something like a push and pull would be much better than just doing all of your pushing and then all of your pulling. Same thing with the lower body. With the lower body, you would want to alternate between a lower body pushing exercise and a lower body pulling. With regard to the categorization of lower body pushing and pulling, pushing is going to be your knee extension exercises like your squats and lunges, and lower body pulling is going to be your hip extension and your knee flexion, so things like your deadlifting. If we were to do something like a full body routine, the way that we would approach this is we would want to do something like a lower body push, an upper body pull, an upper body push, and then a lower body pull. This is going to be terrific because it is going to allow adequate recovery between the different exercises. When you are doing a lower body push, let's say you are doing a squat, if you go right into an upper body pull like a seated cable row, then at that point, your arms and your back are going to be completely refreshed. They're not going to be tired from the squats. Then when you move on to an upper body push, you're training the opposite muscle groups. So instead of training your lats, your posterior deltoids, and your biceps, you're going to be training your triceps, your anterior deltoids, and your chest. And then when you finish off with the lower body pull, by that time you've had enough time to recover from the lower body push exercise, because you've had the upper body pull and push to rest as a gap between the lower body push and the lower body pull. And that is going to be optimal for recovery, and it's going to make for the best workout. So that is the way you would want to order it if you're doing something like a full body. But rest is up. Time for the 5th and final set. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment, as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high-quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.